Just left my house, going to Australia.
Welcome to Modern Grand Tour with me, Garland Lowe. After completing the European leg of my round the world journey, we now arrive in the world's largest country, Russia. Riding the full length of the famous Trans-Siberian Railway, we'll couchsurf with locals along the way to get an insider's view of the fascinating Russian culture. Beginning in the western part of this Eurasian country, my new Russian friends and I explore St. Petersburg, Moscow, Vladimir Suzdal, Nizhny Novgorod, Perm and Yekaterinburg. Then in the eastern part we discover Tobolsk and Tumen, Novosibirsk, Irkutsk and Okhotsk Island, Ulan-Ude, Khabarovsk and finally Vladivostok. In this second episode across Russia and the 10th of this Modern Grand Tour series, we'll learn about the heartbeat of Russia, the first man in space, the atrocities of the Gulags, and of course, meet the locals.
I don't like border.
Yes.
In the Soviet Union, we made a border.
Russia's the best. Everybody else is just mocking us because they frightened of us.
So let's explore Russia's capital city of Moscow.
Right, we're now walking towards some Russian towers and I can already see a pretty cool landmark. Get ready.
Arguably the most famous square in the world, Krasnaya Ploshchad, as it's said in Russian, can mean both Red Square and equally appropriate, Beautiful Square.
It's a pretty impressive square. You got Lenin's tomb over there and there's just a shopping building. And you also got a big massive clock in case you forgot your watch. But look, if we go this way, you can see everybody. I'm kind of tempted to join in, they won't even notice. If I tiptoe and move my hands about, no, that'd be rude, it's rude, isn't it? It's rude, isn't it? This is a place of God. No time for jokes.
Built by the first Tsar of Russia, Ivan the Terrible, in honour of his victory over the Mongols, St. Basil's Cathedral is actually made up of 9 small chapels, each with a Pokemon-style onion head, which are linked by a labyrinth of corridors.
It's a proper maze in here. I'm lost. There's so many different ways to get either up, down, or to the side. It's a little bit like Fort Boyard. Do you remember Fort Boyard on Channel 5? But like more religious. It all looks the same. I don't know where I'm going. Just take me. Let's go this way. That was totally unexpected. I actually don't know how to get out. So just come out of the St. Basil's and then Harrods has just turned up on the doorstep of Red Square. I'm going to visit, we'll see Lenin's body. Some local people. Privet.
Привет.
Lenin's Mausoleum houses the embalmed body of the founder of Communist Russia and would inspire other communist states to remember their leaders in the same way, such as Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, Mao Zedong in China, and both Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il in North Korea. As you might guess, filming was not okay, but here's what I saw. Lenin's body has been on display since 1924, but after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, discussions began over the possibility of Lenin's burial, as was his wish. However, evidently this is yet to materialise and remains an ongoing debate in Russia today.
Just come out. Yeah. Dead body there, isn't there? There you go, there's a couple of boys coming to pay their respects. Interestingly, they bowed to the body of Lenin.
Behind the mausoleum are burials of other Soviet officials, including Joseph Stalin, who previously used to share Lenin's mausoleum before being demoted in 1961 due to the state's reassessment of him and the ensuing reform known as de-Stalinisation, designed to destroy the cult of personality.
I think we're now going to enter the Kremlin. So that was weird. Just waited in the queue out there and come out thinking I'd be entering a room. Well, I've just kind of entered this. Just a street. I've paid to get in to this red fortress, basically.
Moscow's Kremlin, meaning citadel, is the birthplace of Moscow, having begun life as a timber fence. And it was from here that a Moscow-led army defeated their Mongol overlords, eventually establishing Moscow as the new ruler of Russia. Other than its historical importance, it also houses some fascinating relics and oddities, such as the first and the last crown of the Tsars, the tombs of almost every medieval Tsar, the largest bell in the world, the largest cannon in the world, and the red square clock, which is possibly the creepiest in the world. Today, there are no more Tsars that reside in the Kremlin, but it is still of utmost importance, because it is the venue of the presidential inauguration and the president's office.
I don't even know where I'm going. Our music just makes you feel good.
After experiencing one of the most coziest and magical streets I've ever had the pleasure to dance down, it was time for some Soviet arcade machines.
This is like the best night ever. The tokens that they're giving me to put in, they're old USSR coins. So this is the first game I'm going to play. Oh, my glasses are falling down. Oh wow! Oh, I just crashed. There you go. Ah, pants. Obviously lost. That's for back there anyway. The old let's catch a thing. Oh no. She's got the ump. I know. I understand how she feels. She just wasted a coin on getting a lolly. Stupid. We'll try a proper game. Get really close, and then it closes, and then pull back. Did you hear any? When the boat is lined with the line. Accelerator, brake. Can you see my orange bit? It keeps whacking into the. Alright. Oh. Okay, so I've got to. It's a really hard. How do I get past? I just got it. You take your foot off the accelerator or press the brake. The track slows down, gives you more time to push the car through the hole. But I learned that too late. Can't think about it. Get out of your system. Get out of your system.
How do you feel? How do you feel?
I feel weak.
Yeah. You got the same as me.
I got no more.
You got the same as
That
me.
means you're very strong. So we're both very strong.
The next day I went to learn about space exploration at what has to be one of the most brilliantly designed outside museum spaces, with its focus point this 350-foot titanium rocket. But the star of the show inside the museum is, of course, this man. Yuri Gagarin was born in a small Russian village to a carpenter father and a milkmaid mother. Drafted into the Soviet Air Force aged 21, he was selected as one of the 20 outstanding pilots to man the first mission to space. After physical and psychological tests, Gagarin was chosen for his intellect and focus, and particularly noted for his modesty, which may be why he was also the first choice of the other candidates. On the 12th of April 1961, in Soviet Kazakhstan, Gagarin, aged 27, straps himself into the Vostok 1 spacecraft. And at the moment of liftoff, Gagarin famously shouts, Then, for the next 108 minutes, Vostok 1 makes a single orbit around the Earth, and Gagarin becomes the first person to truly see the planet, saying, I see Earth, it is so beautiful. Now descending in just its re-entry capsule known as Little Ball, at 7 kilometers above Earth, Gagarin ejects himself out of the hatch and parachutes into a Russian field, whereupon he explains to the local farmer, Don't be afraid, I am a Soviet citizen like you, who has descended from space, and I must find a telephone to call Moscow. Gagarin immediately becomes an international celebrity and a Soviet hero, with huge parades not seen in Russia since the victory celebrations of the Second World War. Unwilling to risk the life of the USSR's most popular ambassador, Gagarin is no longer scheduled for space missions. But tragically, 7 years later, in 1968, Gagarin dies in a military training flight, aged just 34. Today, every April the 12th, the date Gagarin rocketed into history, is celebrated as Cosmonautics Day in Russia, as International Day of Human Spaceflight by the United Nations, and as Yuri's Night by ordinary people from around the world who hold what they call a global space party. As one commentator famously summed up, his smile lit up the darkness of the Cold War. Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, I salute you. Now, after all that, if I told you that before Yuri Gagarin, the USSR already had 2 real-life heroes successfully visit space, I'm sure you'd be pretty puzzled. So let me ease you in. This is their spacesuit, this is their spaceship, and these are the actual taxidermied cosmonauts, if you can call them that. Beating Yuri Gagarin by 8 months, these 2 previously stray dogs circled the Earth and returned home to become the most celebrated dogs in the Soviet Union. Belka and Strelka, although you had no idea what was going on, I salute you too. The Exhibition of Achievements of the National Economy, or Verdenha as it's known in Russian, is a humongous park containing an entertainment complex. After a lovely walk through some gardens, along a lake, and through a forest, I got to the complex bit, where things got a bit weird.
Kind of an interesting place. We've got a helicopter, a rocket, and an aeroplane. It just feels like a very weird place. Like I'm in some sort of alternative reality.
This odd feeling wasn't helped by my visit to this exhibition.
Back out. I would say on the streets, but I'm not on the streets, I'm in the park. But a really man-made creative park where there are just communist buildings everywhere. I'm going to guess this park was made under the Soviet era and it was designed as a park for the people, with buildings to show the people how grand their system of government was.
Opened in 1939, the Exhibition of Achievements of the National Economy was, as its name suggests, a showcase for Soviet culture and ideology.
This is how I would imagine North Korea to be. Everything is put on for show. There's like hardly anyone here. It's a Saturday night. I said I was interested in exploring more about communism. I think this is it. I'm feeling it.
Your tea?
The next day over breakfast, I asked my Couchsurfing host Yura about life in the Soviet Union. And in particular, using this pot of tea as my real-life example, I asked Yura if he preferred the limited choices of the Soviet period or the many choices of now.
In the Soviet period, so many people buy the tea.
Buy tea.
Now the good tea is very expensive,
Okay.
and so many people cannot buy tea. We have a choice,
Yeah.
but don't have money.
Understand. Interesting.
What's the better? No choice, and you can. Many choice, you can.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yura and I then crossed the magnificent Moscow River, where we were joined by my other couchsurfing host, Miroslav.
Hello. Он ходит на батут.
Кто? Гагарин?
Он ходит надо. Вместе бы.
Вместе?
Да, вместе.
He won't jump in batut with you.
When Miroslav is older, what you want for him to do? Occupation?
Goodbye.
Good boy. Okay, okay. When you were young, what did you have dream?
I want to be cosmonaut.
Cool.
All boys wanted.
Yuri
look
Gagarin.
like Gagarin.
Dissected by this bridge, where Gorky Park ends, the Museum Park of Art begins.
Yura, what is this?
Let's go.
So what is this, Yura?
What do you say? Who is this man?
I don't know.
You know.
I have no idea. Peter the Great.
Peter, yeah.
It's Peter.
Yeah.
Yura's seeming wariness towards this 1997 Peter the Great monument may be because it's actually disliked by many Muscovites, and for good reason. First, the Terminator, as it has been nicknamed, is frequently listed as one of the ugliest statues in the world. Second, it was allegedly made to commemorate Christopher Columbus, but when America wouldn't buy it, it was reworked for the Russians. And third and lastly, Peter the Great actually hated Moscow, so much so, he built a new capital city from scratch, called it St. Petersburg, and moved himself and his family there for the next 200 years. Indeed, Moscow even offered the monument to St. Petersburg, but even they refused. I actually kind of love it. Its outrageousness contrasts with the blank canvas of the Moscow River to one side and the Museum Park of Arts to the other. And added to that, it acts as a giant welcoming sign to the park that itself is famous for being a bizarre sculpture museum, as we're about to see.
So this is a good game. How many Lenins can you see? The answer is 6. And 1 Stalin. And look, his face is.
I don't know what this.
Maybe somebody didn't like it.
Maybe broken.
And this is about the Gulag.
This is about Gulag.
This sculpture, called Victims to the Totalitarian Regime, represents the suffering of those imprisoned in the Gulags, which is the topic of my final museum in Moscow.
Right, so here I am, with my audio guide on.
The Gulags, introduced by Lenin after he came to power in 1917, were concentration camps unique at the time because they were the first to imprison their own citizens, in particular political dissidents, in the name of re-education. However, it was under Stalin from 1930 that the Gulags officially become established, seeing a huge increase in prisoners and an extreme worsening of living conditions involving beatings, rape, working to exhaustion, inadequate warmth and clothing, and starvation, with prisoners resorting to eating dogs, rats, and in one instance, each other. Stalin's key development, though, was to repurpose the Gulags to bring about industrialisation, exploiting forced labour for mining, logging, and construction. This economic drive reached a climax in the Great Purge of 1936-38, where Stalin introduced his targets for prisoner numbers, resulting in the arrests of innocent people who are deemed to be involved in what is officially called counter-revolutionary activities, such as being late for work, considered sabotage, talking to a foreigner, considered treason, and wrapping a fish in a newspaper that contained a picture of Stalin, considered anti-Soviet behaviour. Going one step further, anyone who knew but failed to inform the authorities of such activities was guilty by association. With nobody safe, terror spread across the country.
Меня вызвали после отбоя, я уже легла спать. И что вот, ваше дело закончено. Мы давайте читаем решение, особенно читаем. Мне такое впечатление, что у меня воздух из меня вышел, когда мне сказали 20 лет жизни. Вот. Я не понимала, какой родине я изменила, в чем была измена, почему 20 лет. На выход я пошла.
When Stalin dies in 1953, the gulags begin to be dismantled. In total, around 20 million people went through the atrocities of the gulags, with the death toll estimated to be around 3 million. For those who survived, they faced a new challenge of adapting back to normal life.
Хотелось вам встретиться с тем человеком, который вас найдет. Он говорил, что почему ты не настаиваешь, что это чего я сказать? Я только не... Ну, а что? Он же мне сказал, и я настаиваю. Вы считали, что он виноват, или все-таки система была виновата? Конечно, система. Причем тут его заставили. Она же мне разговаривала, то сказала, я буду твой папа. Все. Этим все сказано.
Today in Russia, the subject of the Gulag is often contextualised as an unfortunate but necessary part of wartime security, and this ambivalent feeling is somewhat evident in the lack of significant Gulag memorials in the country. The Gulag History Museum, founded in 2001 by a former Gulag prisoner, focuses on the human tragedy, and tellingly is one of only 2 museums in Russia dedicated to the subject.
Oh, I learnt so much. Such a significant, vital part of history as well. And yet, it's not said anywhere else, in any of the things I've been to. People I spoke to, people who speak to me about Russia. Actually, it's not even really kind of widely spoken in London. We all know about Hitler's concentration camps, and nobody really talks about the gulags. Just so much going on there.
After experiencing what is basically an art gallery disguised as a metro station, I then went to have dinner with some couchsurfing friends.
I'm with my 2 new friends for tonight. We've got Elena and Lachlan.
Yes.
Okay, I'm Garland. We're going to go into Elena's apartment. What did you know about Russia before coming to Russia?
If you just ask a typical Australian what do they know about Russians?
Yeah, like what's the first thing you think of?
Vodka.
Right, okay.
Seriously, it'd be vodka. Another thing that come up would be road rage, because there's a lot of videos on YouTube. In the media, Putin is quite well known though. Often they don't get portrayed in the most positive light.
When I said I'll be going to Russia, some people were like, are you going to be alright? You're going to be safe? I think it's because, my theory is it's because the Cold War was so recent in everyone's minds. They're like, that's the enemy, why, you know. One of the things, travel's really ingrained into me, but you know, you got nice people and you got nasty people all over the world, really.
Yeah.
And to just generalise one country as...
But then I heard someone say that, let's say Americans
would be much more, hey, have a nice day, how are you? And have maybe this surface kind of layer of niceness.
Yes.
So on the other hand then, would be the Russians, let's say, who have this surfaceness of hardness and not being very, how are you and have a nice day. But then, if you go underneath that layer, they're very friendly. Yeah. Could you generalise Russians as... No. But then would you generalise...
What is Russian? Like, how do you define Russian? It's both kind of a difficult question, because if a person has been living, like, I don't know, Novosibirsk or something, does he call himself Russian? Does he call himself Siberian? What does he call himself? I have no idea. I don't think we have, like, a national idea right now. And that's what they're trying to do intensively right now. It's really frightening in a way, because they're just empty words and no action behind them, like democracy and all that. The biggest trouble I see in this is that many young people believe it. It's patriotic. They're made to believe Russia is the best. Everybody else is just mocking us because they are frightened of us. Like, what the hell is this? What are you talking about? You know, have you traveled the world at all? We are the best. In what sphere are we the best? In weapons, yes. In oil, yes. But like, it's like cheap kind of implementation of the idea that you are the best into the heads, and it sucks because people start believing it, and then everybody's just really mocking us. That's what I see. That's how I see it.
And so, back on the train and reflecting on my time in the capital of Russia, I could conclude that Moscow was a wonderful city of variety, offering grand architecture, romantic avenues, offbeat fun, essential learning, and green spaces. But this variety was unified by one theme: communism. After almost 30 years since the collapse of the Soviet Union, its footprint visibly remains in everyday life, which can leave an odd feeling when faced with a repressive dictator's portrait, or even their dead body. Join me in the next episode of Modern Grand Tour, where we'll be in the historic city of Vladimir and the picturesque town of Suzdal, and where we'll learn about medieval Russia, go on a magical night walk, and of course, meet the locals. So until next time, Godspeed.